Well, sadly, but not surprisingly, the original version of this episode has been censored by YouTube. They said it had themes of self-harm, so I deleted the better part of one word and we're reposting it. Welcome to the New Jersey Criminal Podcast. November 5th, 1991. The Atlantic Ocean off the Canary Islands. The naked body of Robert Maxwell floats in the dark waters beside his yacht, the Lady Ghislaine. The media baron who built an empire on lies, who served multiple masters in intelligence, had met his end. But death, as we've learned, often it's just the changing of the guard. 8 days later, at Mount of Olives in Jerusalem, Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir delivers Maxwell's eulogy to a congregation that reads like a who's who of Israeli intelligence. 6 service heads, politicians, spies, all gathered to honor the man who did more for Israel than we can explain today. And that's a quote. What they couldn't explain then was how Maxwell's death would birth something far more sinister, how his daughter Ghislaine would carry forward his methods, how a mysterious financier named Jeffrey Epstein, already lurking in Maxwell's London offices throughout the 1980s, would perfect the art of blackmail that Robert Maxwell had pioneered. Welcome back to the New Jersey Criminal Podcast. I'm Tom, the producer, in what is already a 3-episode series. We'll be exploring the Maxwell dynasty, a family that turned sexual blackmail into a science. We can look at how Israeli intelligence allegedly manipulated American presidents, with a specific example. And we're uncovering financial networks so complex that they make the Tower's financial Ponzi scheme look like a lemonade stand. So buckle up. What you're about to hear isn't just the story of Epstein, it's the story of how a small Middle Eastern nation allegedly holds the puppet strings of American power and how those strings got tangled in phone sex recordings of a president and an intern. Before Jeffrey Epstein was Jeffrey Epstein, there was Robert Maxwell. And before Robert Maxwell was Robert Maxwell, he was Abraham Labi Haq, born 1923 in what is now Ukraine. The parallels between Robert Maxwell and Epstein aren't just striking, they're instructive. Both men were chameleons, both built their fortunes on other people's money, both served Israeli intelligence at the bare minimum, among other state agencies, and both allegedly used sexual blackmail as their primary weapon. Now, the primary connection through Maxwell is Israeli military intelligence, hence him being buried with military honors, not having been in the military. So Maxwell comes before Epstein. He's the prototype, the proof of concept, if you will. And the picture of Maxwell's true nature, drawn from declassified British intelligence files and the testimony of former Israeli operatives, he used more aliases than a Cold War spy. John Ludwig, Jan Ludwig, Ivan Leslie Dumaurier, Leslie Jones. He didn't settle on Robert Maxwell until he married Elizabeth Maynard in Paris on March 14th in 1945. So even this guy's identity was borrowed. At 12 years old, he joined the Batar movement, a Jewish Zionist organization. This wasn't summer camp. This was ideological training and the recruitment for a future asset. The establishment media, really, they don't touch Maxwell, but those who wade into those waters want you to believe Maxwell was a legitimate businessman who might have had some intelligence connections. But according to declassified documents and insider testimony, it's exactly the opposite. He was an intelligence operation masquerading as a businessman. In 1951, Maxwell took control of a German publishing house, Butterworth Springer, renaming it Pergamon Press. The mainstream media portrays this as a shrewd business acumen, but according to the sources we've reviewed, this wasn't Maxwell's deal at all. It was an MI6 intelligence operation funded by Sir Charles Hambro director of the Bank of England, and former head of special operations during World War II. Maxwell wasn't the buyer, he was the front man, the cutout, the face they put on a British intelligence operation to acquire scientific journals that had been published under the Third Reich. It gets a little more interesting. In 1954, Maxwell is sent to Russia to publish and translate Russian scientific articles. British Foreign Office files made public in 2003 confirmed what intelligence agencies suspected all along, which was that Maxwell was funded by Russia and working for the KGB. Think about this. The same man who's working for a little bit for British MI6, Russian KGB, Israeli intelligence, likely a little bit of CIA, simultaneously. KGB did later acknowledge Maxwell as a high-up Soviet agent, although they did question his loyalty, fair enough, because Maxwell's true allegiance wasn't to Britain or Russia, it was to Israel. As early as 1948, Maxwell played a major role in arming Zionist paramilitaries. He helped smuggle aircraft parts for Israel through the anti-Stalinist Czechoslovakian government. He didn't just support Israel's creation, he was one of the engineers of logistics. Viktor Ostrovsky, the notorious Mossad defector who wrote By Way of Deception, confirmed Maxwell's deep Mossad ties. British intelligence agencies eventually described Maxwell as a Zionist that was loyal only to Israel and a prominent Mossad agent. That doesn't mean he didn't dabble with other intelligence agencies. And he certainly had properties in other countries. At this point, Maxwell's story becomes a template for Epstein. According to Ostrovsky and other sources, Israeli intelligence services satisfied Robert Maxwell's sexual appetite by supplying him with prostitutes. This wasn't just a perk of the job, it was leverage. Maxwell's hotel rooms were rigged with cameras, and Israeli intelligence acquired a small library of video footage of Maxwell in sexually compromising situations. So they weren't rewarding their asset, they were controlling him with blackmail. Meanwhile, Maxwell's media empire became a vehicle for intelligence operations. In 1989, he partnered with the Soviets to take over pharmaceutical company Teva. He acquired ownership of the Jerusalem Post, adding to his control of right-wing Daily Mirror publications. But the real money came from a darker source. According again to Viktor Ostrovsky, this is a quote, "The Mossad financed many of its operations in Europe with money that was stolen from Maxwell's newspaper's pension fund." Ostrovsky claims that Mossad gave the money to go ahead and buy the Mirror Group publishing. And the moment he got it, they took over all of the pension fund money. Weeks after Maxwell's death, authorities discovered a $560 million hole in the Mirror's pension fund, Ostrovsky's allegations allegedly confirm. Maxwell's most infamous betrayal involved Israeli nuclear technician Mordecai Vanunu, who exposed Israel's secret Dimona nuclear facilities to the world. So that's Vanunu and Dimona. Vanunu took his information to Maxwell's Mirror publications, trusting the media baron to help him expose the truth. Instead, Maxwell called the Israelis. Vanunu was lured to Italy, drugged, abducted, secretly transported to Israel, and spent 18 years in prison, including over 11 years in solitary confinement. That's a playbook. Gain trust, exploit secrets, betray those who trust you, serve your handlers above all else. By the 1980s, according to former Mossad agent who we've previously mentioned in this series, Ari Ben-Menashe, Maxwell was brokering deals between the Mossad and the KGB that allowed Israelis to hide money from arms sales to Iran. This is part of the Iran-Contra affair, but not the way you learned about it in school. The official story says America shipped arms to Iran to secure hostage releases. But according to Ben-Menashe, it was actually a deal for Israel to arm and train militants in Nicaragua with the cash laundered through Russia via Maxwell's networks. And here's the key detail of this story. Throughout the 1980s, while Maxwell was orchestrating these international intelligence operations, a young financier named Jeffrey Epstein was a regular to Maxwell's London offices. And we covered this. The one thing Epstein was good at, and it was probably 70% of his operation versus the smaller percentage of the weird, gross sex trafficking stuff with underage girls, was doing all sorts of illegal money laundering and hiding money. And that was what he was good at. If 80% of the people in his damn black book are probably people who committed financial crimes, not sex crimes. You notice nobody in the media talks about that? The mainstream media wants you to believe Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell met in the 1990s after Robert Maxwell's death. But again, Ari Ben-Menashe tells a different story. He claims to have had several meetings with Jeffrey Epstein in Robert Maxwell's office all throughout the 80s, a full decade before the official narrative. Ben-Menashe was explicit. Both Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, quote, were agents for Israel, unquote. On November 5th, 1991, Robert Maxwell's body is found floating in the Atlantic. Investigative journalists Gordon Thomas and Martin Dillon allege that Maxwell, quote, sealed his fate when he threatened Israeli intelligence leadership to disclose their operations unless they help save his media empire. The Mossad leadership, or Israeli military intelligence, reportedly ordered his assassination 3 months later. But here's a detail that should pique your interest. Samuel Pizer, Robert Maxwell's lawyer and business representative in France, later held the exact same position for Jeffrey Epstein. So the operation didn't die with Maxwell. It just found new management. And I would argue Ghislaine is still chairman of the board because Ghislaine is at this point the connection between Epstein and intelligence, the go-between. Remember where her father was buried? He's one of the great spy heroes of the land. But maybe a lady isn't, and I use that term loosely, maybe a female isn't the right face for this type of operation. There goes Jeffrey Epstein as candidate number one. So maybe that's how it looked. So let's jump to February 1997. The Oval Office. President Bill Clinton sits across from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. What Clinton doesn't know is that Israeli intelligence has been listening to his most intimate conversations. And what happens next allegedly becomes one of the most brazen acts of blackmail in presidential history. The Clinton-Netanyahu-Lewinsky affair isn't just a political scandal. It's a masterclass in how foreign intelligence services allegedly manipulate American presidents, and it's a preview of the techniques that Jeffrey Epstein would allegedly perfect. So let me walk you through what allegedly happened. According to Daniel Halper's book, and I want to say Halper's book is like a decade old, but all of a sudden some of the things in it are rising to the surface in some media corners. And this is corroborated by other sources. By early 97, the Clinton-Lewinsky affair was the worst kept secret in elite Washington. Linda Tripp knew, George Conway knew, Ann Coulter knew, Brett Kavanaugh knew, Ken Starr knew, Paula Jones's lawyers knew. If Washington insiders knew, foreign intelligence services definitely knew. And Monica Lewinsky's phone line, unlike the White House, was way easy to tap. Shortly after Clinton's February 97 meeting with Netanyahu, Clinton's secretary Betty Curry invited Lewinsky to an Oval Office meeting. Clinton told her he had something important to tell her, and during what would be their final sexual encounter, maybe not during, I'm assuming maybe after or before that part, Clinton told Lewinsky that a foreign embassy had tapped his phone and recorded their conversations. He didn't specify which. But the timing immediately after his meeting with Netanyahu, maybe it was Netanyahu. Clinton even suggested a cover story. If confronted with the tapes, they should claim they knew they were under surveillance and the phone sex was just a put on for whoever was listening, which is a great cover story. Let's pretend that I won't waste time on it. So the president of the United States was allegedly so concerned about foreign surveillance that he developed a cover story for his phone sex conversations. Fast forward to fall 1998, the White River Summit in Maryland. Clinton is hosting Netanyahu and Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat for crucial Middle East peace negotiations. At 7 a.m., after grueling all-night negotiations, Netanyahu approaches Clinton privately. He demands the release of convicted Israeli spy Jonathan Pollard. And so this is where the alleged blackmail happens. Netanyahu doesn't make explicit threats. He doesn't say, release Pollard or I'll expose the tapes. And that would be amateurish. Instead, Netanyahu allegedly tells Clinton, the Israeli government has thrown those tapes away. It sounds innocent, but context is everything. Netanyahu is making it clear he knows about the tapes. He's letting Clinton know they exist or existed and could theoretically exist again. It's bringing that up at that time speaks more than any part of the exchange. And that's the same technique that Epstein allegedly used with Bill Gates years later, allegedly. Epstein didn't directly threaten Gates. Well, no, we've seen this email. He did send an email about Gates' affair with a professional poker player asking for some type of charitable donation, maybe for a scholarship, quote unquote. And the message wasn't pay me or I'll expose you. It was, I know about this thing. And that's all you need to say. CIA chief George Tenet understood exactly what was happening. He told Clinton he would resign on the spot if Clinton agreed to Pollard's release. The CIA had a bipartisan commitment to keeping Pollard behind bars for his espionage against the U.S. Clinton agreed to review Pollard's case but didn't release him. Pollard was eventually freed in 2015 under Barack Obama. On the last day of his first term, Trump pardoned Pollard's handler. Today, Pollard is an outspoken supporter of extremist Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir and has called for the, quote, full ethnic cleansing of Gaza, unquote. Now, you might ask, why would this blackmail be effective in fall 98 when the Lewinsky affair was already public? Clinton had admitted to the affair in grand jury testimony in August 98. What most people don't understand, the tapes themselves were never public. Clinton admitted to inappropriate, intimate physical contact with Lewinsky. He never admitted to recorded phone sex or God knows what kind of embarrassing filth they're in. The existence of actual recordings that can be transcribed and put into Time magazine, especially in foreign hands, represents a quantum leap in his vulnerability. And the fact that Halper's book casually just inserted this allegation into the narrative associated with testimony that Lewinsky herself gave to the Ken Starr investigation, and nobody challenged it. Clinton didn't jump up and down. Nobody yelled and screamed. It seems like perhaps there is credibility to it. The alleged Netanyahu blackmail operation would be crucial to understanding the Epstein story because it demonstrates the exact same methodology: surveillance of American officials, collection of compromising material, subtle leverage rather than explicit threats, and service to Israeli intelligence objectives, among others. But again, this all goes back fruit of the Robert Maxwell tree, super spy. So according to all the sources we reviewed, the same networks that allegedly enabled Netanyahu's gambit with Clinton also created, funded, and protected Epstein's operations. 1980s London, Robert Maxwell's office. According to former Mossad operative Ari Ben-Menashe, Jeffrey Epstein is a regular presence here, often arriving, quote, between trips to and from Israel. This isn't the Epstein of popular imagination, the mysterious financier who appeared from nowhere. This is Epstein, the student learning the craft from the master, turning into one of the most effective blackmail operators in modern history. Ben Menashe's account directly contradicts the mainstream narrative. The media wants you to believe Epstein met Ghislaine Maxwell in the 90s after Robert Maxwell's death. Ben Menashe claims he had several meetings with Epstein in the office throughout the 80s. Maxwell allegedly wanted us, quote unquote, to accept Epstein as part of the group. That's not social networking. That's integration into the business. Ben Menashe, Maxwell, and Nick Davies, foreign editor of Maxwell's Daily Mirror, were allegedly involved in the transfer and sale of military equipment and weapons from Israel to Iran on behalf of Israeli intelligence during this same time period. Maxwell wanted to involve Epstein in these arms transfers, although Ben Menashe claims Epstein wasn't competent and wasn't accepted by his group. Epstein did manage to develop close ties with several arms dealers in the 80s, including Sir Douglas Lees, who we mentioned, Adnan Khashoggi, and Lees was a British arms dealer who, again, according to sworn testimony from Stephen Hoffenberg, allegedly trained Epstein in arms trafficking and money laundering. So the connections are consistent. Multiple sources, multiple testimonies, all pointing to the same conclusion. Epstein was being trained by established intelligence assets throughout the 80s. Ghislaine Maxwell was also being trained. Ben Menashe asserted Ghislaine accompanied her father so frequently that she was involved in his intelligence-related activities to some extent. And think about this. While other young women her age were attending university or starting careers, Ghislaine Maxwell was allegedly learning intelligence tradecraft from Israel's most important assets. Again, back to Hoffenberg testimony, who partnered with Epstein in the Towers financial Ponzi scheme, later claimed that Epstein boasted of his ties to Israeli intelligence services. Crucially, Hoffenberg stated it was Ghislaine Maxwell who had made the introduction. Even after Robert Maxwell's death in 1991, the networks remained intact. Hoffenberg maintained ties with the Epstein-Maxwell connected networks, using, quote, the same lawyers that Robert Maxwell had used to take over the New York Daily News, when Hoffenberg later tried to buy the New York Post. The operation was way bigger than any one person. It was an infrastructure at this point, a system, a network designed to survive the death or imprisonment of any individual component. Here's something that is a little terrifying. According to documents that are public, Epstein visited the Clinton White House 17 times between 93 and 95, often accompanied by attractive young women. These are the questions that won't be asked if Bill and Hillary Clinton answer a subpoena to Congress next week that's been sent out. Like, this is where Congress isn't going to go, because those probably weren't social calls. Epstein had a dramatically underreported relationship with the Clinton White House that pointed towards a major scandal of the Clinton era that has not been revealed or investigated. Many of these meetings, which we covered a couple episodes ago, were with Mark Middleton, who later died under the most ridiculously suspicious circumstances in May 2022. All right, I'll say it. He allegedly hung himself and then shot himself twice in the chest with a shotgun. Middleton was probably embroiled in foreign espionage activities related to, quote, illegal fundraising efforts for Bill Clinton's 96 re-election campaign. One of Epstein's 1990s girlfriends, Frances Jardine, who lived in Epstein-controlled apartments that used to house underage girls, accompanied him to at least one of his visits to the Clinton White House. So Jeffrey Epstein is bringing young women, potentially underage women, into the White House while allegedly operating a sexual blackmail network for Israeli intelligence. Epstein also attended a political fundraiser for Bill Clinton's 1996 re-election campaign, hosted by financier Ron Perlman, who's not, at this point just connected to power. He's helping finance it. And in April 1995, Epstein's close friend Lynn Forrester, later to become a Rothschild, wrote to President Bill Clinton, using my 15 seconds of access to discuss Jeffrey Epstein and currency stabilization, I neglected to talk to you about a topic near and dear to my heart. Currency stabilization, in the same conversation is Jeffrey Epstein being discussed with the President of the United States? What kind of currency stabilization, like what is his expertise? He didn't graduate from college still. The picture that emerges from these documents, and these are White House FOIA releases, it's not just Jeffrey Epstein as a lone predator. It's Epstein as a potentially sophisticated intelligence asset trained by Robert Maxwell's network, deployed against American political figures, and granted extraordinary access to the highest levels of power. Ben Minash was explicit about the mission, saying Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, quote, found a niche for themselves blackmailing American and other political figures for the Israelis, unquote. He elaborated, quoting again, it's hard for people to understand why Israel would want to get blackmail on American leaders. Israel is blackmailing their leaders in the United States. It was quite a thing. Quite a thing indeed. The systematic compromise of American leadership by a foreign intelligence service using sexual blackmail as the primary weapon, and Jeffrey Epstein, the perfect student of Robert Maxwell's Academy of Blackmail, becoming its most successful graduate, and he's got the entree conversation with all these powerful people of the reputation where he's known to be really good at money laundering and hiding money and tax evasion. So now, August 15th, 2019, 5 days after Epstein's alleged suicide, the New York Post runs a cover story with the headline, "The Post Finds Her," featuring an exclusive photo of Ghislaine Maxwell at an In-N-Out Burger in Los Angeles. The photo shows Maxwell looking relaxed, reading a book, apparently hiding in plain sight, and the message was clear. We found the elusive socialite when law enforcement couldn't, except it was all theater. The Daily Mail discovered metadata showing the photo was taken by Meadowgate, a company owned by Leah Safian, who is Ghislaine Maxwell's defense attorney and fixer. The photo was allegedly staged by Maxwell's own team. The staging likely went deeper than anyone initially realized, considering in the background of the photo is a movie poster for Good Boys, a comedy about the sex lives of preteens, for Christ's sake. So when investigators, or that's just a terrible coincidence, but when investigators checked with Outfront, the company that manages bus stop advertising, they were told, we do not have any records of this Good Boys poster being posted there. So the poster was allegedly photoshopped into the image. So this isn't just alibi creation, it's psychological warfare, if that's true. The choice of movie poster about preteen sexuality and a stage photo of the alleged madam of a child sex trafficking ring wouldn't be a coincidence. Maxwell was also photographed reading the Book of Honor, The Secret Lives and Deaths of the CIA. As one commenter noted, this is just an FU to the public. The New York Post's role in this deception raises disturbing questions about media complicity in intelligence operations. Give me a break. I kind of get the feeling now that the CIA has been in every newsroom since Kennedy's head exploded in Dealey Plaza. What if Israeli intelligence had reached into the New York Post's newsroom? What if they're blackmailing somebody there? Because it sure looks like that whole release is more of a way to either protect or be sadistic. I don't know. They can't be that stupid. I digress. Now, political response to the Epstein revelations has been equally telling. And Trump recently called the Epstein revelations a Democrat hoax, stating, their new scam is what we will forever call the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. Like, bro, this has been going on since 2007 under George Bush, you maniac. This isn't a partisan issue, and it's not just about Jeffrey Epstein. And to limit it down, to boil it down to that is like rudimentary. The people aren't concerned about that. They're concerned, is the fruits of Epstein's labor running our country? And there's like two officials in our whole country who are fighting for transparency. Thomas Massey is one of them. Not coincidentally, he's one of like 4 or 6 politicians in the House of Representatives who didn't swear an actual literal oath of allegiance to Israel, which is a thing. He's offered an effort to force a vote on releasing the files. He, of course, thinks we deserve to know. He thinks it looks like corruption. And so there's these efforts, and some of them meaningful, but the resistance to the transparency tells its own story. I think Trump can wave a wand and release a bunch of documents that he's pretending lower judges are restricting access to. I think he's kind of full of shit. So the Maxwell-Epstein network, it's clearly not just about compromising American officials. It's about hiding the fact that American officials can even be compromised. It's about making sure that this doesn't become a mainstream conversation. I'm sure. I'm terrified at the fact that quote unquote normies and not just crazy uncles with conspiracy theories are now talking about this very subject matter. That horrifies me because I don't know what lengths the parties involved will go to avoid the consequences if this all does come to light. So, I don't know, somewhere in an office we can't see anyway, in meetings we're never going to hear about, the next generation of Epsteins is being recruited, trained, and deployed with better skills for the internet age. So Epstein wasn't an aberration. He wasn't a lone predator that somehow gained access to the world's most powerful people through charm and mystery. Epstein was a product. Epstein was a weapon. Epstein was part of a system. Epstein was certainly manufactured by intelligence agencies to serve intelligence purposes. Epstein was absolutely protected by prosecutors to maintain intelligence operations. Look at Alex Acosta. That's a direct quote from a U.S. attorney. Epstein was intelligence. I was told to leave him alone. And Epstein was eliminated when he became more of a liability than an asset. That's why I think Ghislaine's higher than he is on the org chart. The victims deserve justice, the enablers deserve prosecution, and the American people deserve to know how their government might allegedly be compromised by foreign intelligence services using sexual blackmail. And until that happens, and until we dismantle the networks that created and protected these operations, the Epstein story isn't over. I lament digging into this, and now that I've started producing it, I'm obligated to stay alive for another 85 years until the documents come out, because otherwise I think it's just a rat in a maze that doesn't even have cheese in it at this point. This has been episode 3 of this whole Epstein experiment. Next go around, we're going to explore the financial networks that funded the operations. We're going to look at potentially where the surveillance infrastructure came from and ongoing efforts to prevent accountability, plus some of the current events that are going on with Ghislaine being moved. Is she going to be whacked? Is she going to go free? Who knows? Sources reference include Daniel Halper's Clinton, Inc., The Audacious Rebuilding of a Political Machine, Victor Ostrowski's By Way of Deception, the various interviews you can find with former Israeli military intelligence officer Ari Ben-Menashe, Whitney Webb's One Nation Under Blackmail Volumes 1 and 2. There was a recent investigative report done by Candace Owen into elements of Robert Maxwell's background that was helpful. Stephen Hoffenberg's sworn testimony, British Foreign Office declassified files from 2003, New York Times reporting on the Pollard Summit demand, investigative work by Gordon Thomas and Martin Dillon, of course, Whitney Webb I mentioned. And so we'll see you soon.